Hi, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony Stratford. And as usual, we're having a short reading, but this time it's from Galatians as we come to the start of a new year. So this is Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. But when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive the full rights of sons. The letter to the Galatians is a letter to a church that was very religious. Well, you might think, what's wrong with that? Well, they were obsessed with keeping the Jewish law. There had been some Jewish teachers that had obviously ended up among them. And the attitude seems to have been that Christianity was fine, but if they really wanted to be top-class Christians, what they needed was the Jewish law. So they'd gone back to all the rules and regulations that were taught there. But Paul, when he's writing to them, points out that this is a major problem. Well, we might think, why? Why is keeping the Jewish law a problem? Well, he highlights it in this verse, and this is chapter 2, verse 21. I do not set aside grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. The problem was they were putting all their faith in the law and not what they had been taught about the work of Jesus Christ. Some people say, and I think it's probably something that's true, timing is everything. Now, if I think about it, and I think about football, I'll be watching Match of the Day later tonight, but if I think about it, the perfectly timed pass, the perfectly timed run, those are the things that lead to creative moves, that lead to goals. So yeah, timing is everything. The right ball at the right time can split a defence and lead to an advantage through someone scoring. And in this passage, we really see God's perfect timing. The time had come. What we have here is the word fully, or in some versions, in the fullness of time. You get the picture? It's not too soon, it's not too late. It's like the perfectly timed pass. And the interesting thing was that there were two factors that really contribute to the spread of the gospel when Jesus had come to this world and after he had left it. Firstly, there was an interesting development in the Roman Empire of the time. There was a decline in the belief of the old gods. People were seeing the worship of them as wanting. So into this comes a new message, a message of hope, the message of Christ. There was another thing that led to the huge spread of the gospel very quickly. This was a time of peace. Because of the authority and the dominion of Rome, there was peace throughout the empire. Roads had been built. This meant that most of the time you could travel a lot more safely than you used to. So Christians were spreading the word quickly. Greek was the common language. And of course, the majority of the New Testament is written in Greek. The time had fully come. It was just the right time. But what did God do at this time? Well, we saw very clearly, he sent his Son. God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Two things to note here. This, again, concentrates our minds on the humanness of Christ. Yes, he was fully God, but he was fully man. And he was born under or subject to the law. Why? Well, verse 5, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive the full rights of sons. Paul elsewhere in the letter points out that you can do your best to try and fulfill the law, but the problem is if you slip up on one thing, you slip up on it all. In fact, in the law itself, he points out, cursed is everyone who does not keep all that is written in the law. So there's a problem. Our best efforts will inevitably fail. Think of how Jesus taught the law. He said it wasn't just the word, it was the thoughts of the heart. It wasn't enough not to murder. It was still a sin to have angry thoughts against one's family or friends or anyone for that matter. So the law was not the answer, but Jesus was subject to the law, kept it perfectly as the perfect man, and has paid the price to redeem. That's what you did when you paid for the freedom of a slave. And why? And this is the best bit of all, so we can be part of God's family. We become and get the full rights as a children of a wealthy man might get. We are God's heirs, as it were. We're invited in. This is made possible not by us trying to do our best, not by anything like that. Yes, we should. There are elements in the law which are to be kept. There are things that please God there, but namely, it is God's grace. Paul did not want the Galatians to forget God's grace. God's grace is about what God did, as indeed Paul is pointing out. It wasn't that somehow mankind summoned God. God decided to act decisively at a particular time. Just think of how Jesus is introduced in the Gospel of Matthew. It's actually quoting the book of Isaiah. And it says this in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 1 and verse 23. The virgin will be with child and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. We were looking at John's Gospel, and we thought of how in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God in the beginning. And then later, the Word became flesh. Jesus came and he dwelt among us. Why? So that when we can be forgiven, that's something only God can do. Not so we can try and pull ourselves up by our own works. Thank you so much for listening.